I sit at my desk, the smooth wood cool under my fingertips. Papers are stacked neatly in front of me, each folder labeled with a name. My office smells faintly of lemon polish, a scent that always grounds me. I glance at my watch. 5 minutes to go. My heart beats a little faster, but I keep my face steady. I've waited for this moment for years. One folder catches my eye. The name on it reads, Preston, Eleanor, my former mother-in-law. I trace the letters with my finger, feeling the weight of that name. 6 years ago, these people wouldn't meet my gaze. They treated me like I was invisible, someone who didn't belong in their world. Today, they'll walk through that door, sit across from me, and explain why they deserve to keep the jobs I gave them. They don't know I own this company, not yet. Let's go back to where it all started. Before the fancy office, before the divorce, before I ever heard the name Preston. My name is Lauren, and 6 years ago, I was just a woman trying to make it. I had a business degree I couldn't afford to use, buried under student loans that kept me awake at night. I worked 3 jobs, waitressing, tutoring, cleaning offices after hours. My hands were always chapped from dishwater, but I had big dreams. I wanted to build something of my own, something that mattered. One rainy afternoon, I stopped at a small coffee shop downtown to escape the drizzle. The place smelled like fresh espresso and warm pastries, and the windows were streaked with rain. I was scribbling budget notes on a napkin when a man smiled at me from across the room. His name was Daniel. He was tall with warm brown eyes and a laugh that made me forget my soaked shoes. He asked if he could join me, and we talked for hours. About books, music, the way rain makes everything feel quieter. Daniel was different from anyone I'd met. He was confident, successful, and kind. At least, that's what I thought. Looking back, I see the little signs I missed. The way he dodged questions about his family, how he always changed the subject when I mentioned my struggles. But in that moment, I was falling for him hard. When he asked me out again, I said yes without hesitation. I felt like my life was finally turning around, like I'd found someone who saw me for me. 6 months later, we were engaged. I remember staring at the ring on my finger, sparkling under the cafe lights, thinking this was my fairy tale. I was ready to start a new chapter with Daniel, to build a life together. I didn't know then how much his family would change everything. The first year of our marriage felt like a dream. We'd dance in our tiny apartment to old jazz records, laughing until we couldn't breathe. Daniel would surprise me with flowers, leave sweet notes on the fridge. I felt loved, chosen, but there were moments that made me pause. Like when he'd correct the way I said certain words, saying it was just to help me fit in. Or how he'd tense up when I brought up meeting his family. I told myself it was normal. Every couple has quirks, right? Then came the invitation to his parents' house for dinner. I'll never forget pulling up to their mansion. It was massive, with tall white columns and windows that gleamed like mirrors. The driveway was lined with perfectly trimmed hedges, and a fountain bubbled in the courtyard. I smoothed my dress, suddenly feeling small in my thrift store find. Daniel squeezed my hand, but his smile was tight. Inside, the house was even grander. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the floors shone like glass. His mother Eleanor greeted me with a thin smile. "Oh, Lauren, how charming," she said, eyeing my dress. Her voice was polite, but her eyes were cold. His father, Charles, shook my hand but barely looked at me. Over dinner, I tried to keep up. When Charles mentioned stock market trends, I joined in, sharing what I'd learned in school. He raised an eyebrow surprised and said, "Well, that's unexpected." I thought it was a compliment. But as the night went on, I noticed things. Daniel wasn't the warm, funny man I knew. He sat straighter, spoke more formally, and barely touched my hand. His mother asked about my quaint little hometown, her lips curling slightly. I laughed it off, telling myself families need time to warm up. I wanted them to like me. I wanted to belong. A few months later, they invited us to their annual summer garden party. The backyard was like something from a movie, long tables covered in white linen, champagne glasses sparkling in the sunlight, the air filled with the scent of roses and expensive perfume. Women in flowing dresses laughed under wide-brimmed hats, and men in tailored suits clinked glasses. I wore a new dress I'd saved up for, hoping to feel like I fit in. I was carrying a tray of appetizers, trying to help when I heard it. Eleanor's voice, sharp and clear, floated from a group of women nearby. "If you need more napkins, just ask the help," she said, nodding toward me. Laughter followed, light but cruel. My face burned. I stood there, frozen, the tray heavy in my hands. I looked for Daniel, hoping he'd say something, anything. He was across the lawn, chuckling with his cousins, pretending not to hear. That night, I confronted him in our hotel room. "Your mom called me the help, Daniel, in front of everyone." My voice shook, but I kept it steady. He sighed, loosening his tie. "That's just mom being mom, Lauren. Don't be so sensitive." His words hit like a slap. I stared at him, the man I loved, and felt a crack form in my heart. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, the hum of the air conditioner filling the silence. Was I overreacting? Was this just how rich families were? I replayed the moment over and over. Eleanor's voice, the laughter, Daniel's shrug. Deep down I knew something was wrong, but I wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. Okay, let's hit pause for a second. Have you ever been in a moment where someone made you feel like you didn't belong? Maybe it was a word, a look, or a laugh that cut deeper than it should. What was going through your mind? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I know our community would love to hear from you. Hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you don't miss it. After that garden party, I tried harder to belong. I wanted the Prestons to see me as family, not an outsider. But the harder I tried, the smaller I felt. It started with little comments. At dinner, Eleanor would tilt her head and say, "Your accent is so unique, Lauren. Where did you say you're from again?" Daniel's sister Claire would giggle when I used the wrong fork. My clothes were always too casual or too loud. I'd smile through it, but each word chipped away at me. One afternoon, Eleanor insisted on taking me shopping. "Let's fix that wardrobe of yours," she said, her voice sweet but sharp. We walked into a boutique where dresses cost more than my rent. She held up a beige gown, plain and stiff. "This is more appropriate," she said. I hated it, but I bought it, hoping it would make her like me. When I wore it to their next event, she didn't even comment. Daniel started changing too. At home, he was still my charming husband, but around his family, he turned cold. One night, after I laughed too loudly at a dinner, he pulled me aside. "Can't you at least try to fit in?" he whispered. His words stung worse than Eleanor's. I stared at him, my throat tight, but I nodded. I didn't want to lose him. I started changing myself. I signed up for accent reduction classes, practicing in my car until my voice sounded foreign to me. I hid etiquette books in the bathroom, memorizing which spoon went where. I straightened my curls, wore muted colors, spoke less. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. I was losing who I was, and I didn't know how to stop. The Prestons loved their business dinners, where they'd talk about real estate deals and investments. I'd sit there smiling, waiting for a chance to join in, but they'd steer the conversation away from me, asking Daniel about properties or his father about stocks. Once I tried sharing an idea about market trends, something I'd read in my old textbooks. Charles cut me off mid-sentence. "Let's not get sidetracked," he said, turning to Daniel. Everyone moved on, like I hadn't spoken. One night, I overheard Charles and his brother in the study. They were talking about a new development project, how they'd bought out small businesses at low prices, forcing owners out. "It's just how the game's played," Charles said, laughing. My stomach twisted. Their wealth wasn't just old money, it was built on pushing people down. I looked at Daniel, hoping he'd say something. He didn't. He just sipped his drink and nodded. Daniel wasn't always like this. Deep down, he loved me. I saw it in the way he'd hold me after a long day, whispering that we'd build a life together. But his family was everything to him. Their approval was a weight he couldn't shake. He'd grown up hearing he was a Preston, that he had to uphold their name. When they criticized me, he felt torn. Defend me, and he'd risk their respect. Stay quiet, and he'd hurt me. He chose them. I found out later he'd been talking to Eleanor about me. I saw a text on his phone one night when he was in the shower. "She's trying, Mom, but she's not one of us," he wrote. Eleanor replied, "Give it time. She'll learn her place." My hands shook as I read it. The man I loved was letting them tear me apart. Thanksgiving was my last chance to win them over. I spent weeks preparing. I studied recipes, practiced table settings, even watched videos on how to carve a turkey. I wanted everything to be perfect. The night before, I stood in front of our bedroom mirror rehearsing what I'd say. "Charles, what do you think about the new tax laws?" I practiced, forcing a smile. "Claire, how's your charity event going?" My reflection looked tired, but I kept going. I needed them to see me. The dinner was at their mansion, the dining room glowed with candlelight, and the table was set with china that probably cost more than my car. I wore the beige dress Eleanor picked, my hair pinned tightly. I felt like a stranger in my own skin. I tried joining the conversation, asking about their vacation homes in Italy. Claire smirked, smiled, and said, "Oh, Lauren, you wouldn't understand places like that." The table laughed. I gripped my napkin, my face hot. Then it happened. Eleanor reached for her wine glass and accidentally knocked it over, red liquid splashing across my dress. "Oh dear," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "You might want to clean that up in the kitchen." The room went quiet. Everyone looked at me, waiting. Daniel stared at his plate. I stood, the wet fabric clinging to me, and walked to the kitchen. My hands trembled as I dabbed at the stain. I could hear their laughter through the door. Looking back, I wonder if I'm remembering it wrong. Maybe they weren't trying to hurt me. Maybe I was too sensitive, searching for reasons to feel left out. Pain can twist your memories, make you see enemies where there were none. But then I remember something clear as day. A week before Thanksgiving, I'd overheard Charles and his brother in the hallway. I was bringing coats to the guest room when I heard my name. "Lauren's a temporary situation," Charles said. "Daniel will grow out of her." His brother chuckled. "She's not Preston material." I waited for Daniel to speak up. He was right there. He didn't. When I asked him about it later, he shrugged. "You must have misheard," he said, turning away. But I hadn't. Back at Thanksgiving, I returned to the table, the stain still visible on my dress. I sat, trying to act normal. The family was talking about their ski lodge now, their voices loud and carefree. Then Charles did it. He slid his empty glass toward me, not even glancing my way. "Another bourbon when you get a chance," he said, like I was a waitress. The ice clinked in the glass, loud in my ears. My breath caught. Everything slowed down. I felt the weight of the glass in my hand, cold and heavy. I saw their faces, Eleanor's tight smile, Claire's quick glance away, Daniel's eyes fixed on the table. They were laughing, talking, living in a world where I didn't exist. In that moment, I saw my future. Years of this, years of being invisible, of shrinking until there was nothing left of me. I stood up. My chair scraped the floor, but no one looked. I held the glass, my knuckles white. Then I turned and walked out, past the dining room, through the grand foyer, out the front door. The night air was cold, sharp against my skin. I was still holding the glass, its edges digging into my palm. I didn't look back. That moment when you realize your worth isn't being seen, it can change everything. Have you had an empty glass moment, one that made you say, "I deserve better"? Share it in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else. And if you've ever walked away from a toxic situation, hit that like button to show you're with me. Part 3 is coming, and trust me, you won't believe what happens next. Subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss it. I sat in my car in the mansion's parking lot, the beige dress still damp with wine. The bourbon glass rested on the passenger seat, glinting under a streetlight. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. Daniel's name flashed with missed calls, but I didn't answer. Instead, I dialed Jenna, a friend I hadn't spoken to in months. "Can I crash at your place?" I asked, my voice barely steady. She didn't hesitate. "Come over now." By morning, Daniel's messages flooded my phone. First, they were angry. "Where are you? You embarrassed me." Then they turned to bargaining. "Let's talk, Lauren. We can fix this." By the third day, they were threats. "You'll regret walking out." I met with a lawyer in a cramped office that smelled of old coffee. She leaned forward, her face serious. "The Prestons have deep connections," she said. "They'll make this hard." She was right. Within weeks, I couldn't find work. I'd apply for jobs in my field, marketing, finance, anything my degree qualified me for, and hear the same thing. "Sorry, we can't hire you." One recruiter was blunt. The Prestons made it clear you're off limits. My bank account dropped to 87.43. I stared at the number on my phone, my stomach sinking. I'd walked out of that mansion, but I hadn't escaped their reach. 2 weeks later, I was living in my car. I parked in empty lots at night. The seats reclined as far as they'd go. I kept a blanket in the back, but it didn't stop the cold from seeping in. My clothes stayed in a duffel bag, wrinkled and musty. I'd brush my teeth at gas stations, avoiding my reflection in the smudged mirrors. Every day felt heavier, like I was carrying that bourbon glass all over again. I applied for any job I could find. Receptionist, cashier, data entry. But the Prestons' influence followed me. One manager, after checking my references, shook his head. The Prestons wouldn't approve, he said, not meeting my eyes. I wanted to scream, but I just nodded and left. One morning, I sat in a public restroom, the fluorescent hum loud in my ears. My phone was in my hand, Daniel's number on the screen. I could call him, apologize, go back. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. My thumb hovered over the call button. Then I caught my reflection in the mirror. Tired eyes, messy hair, but still me. I put the phone down. I splashed cold water on my face, the shock waking me up. I wasn't going back. I applied for cleaning jobs that day. My first cleaning job was for a wealthy family in a house bigger than the Prestons. The wife barely looked at me as she handed me a mop. "Just stay out of the way," she said, waving me off. I scrubbed floors, dusted shelves, and kept my head down. But then I heard something. The husband was on the phone in his study, door ajar, talking about a new tech investment. "It's a sure thing," he said, rattling off details, company names, stock prices. I froze, sponge in hand, listening. That's when it hit me. People like me, cleaners, drivers, maids, were invisible to them. They'd talk about anything in front of us, deals, scandals, opportunities. I remembered a professor from business school, his voice clear in my mind. Information is the most valuable currency. I started paying attention. While I vacuumed, I'd catch snippets of conversations, market tips, real estate moves, even which families needed reliable cleaners. I kept mental notes, storing every detail. One night I met Maria, another cleaner at a job. She was like me, smart, hardworking, but stuck in a job that didn't see her. We got coffee at a diner after our shift, the smell of fries and burnt coffee filling the air. Our cups sat untouched as we talked. "These rich folks," Maria said, leaning forward, "they want cleaners they can trust, people who won't gossip or steal, but they don't want to pay for it." I nodded, my mind racing. We kept talking. What if we offered something better? A cleaning service for high-end clients, one that promised discretion, quality, and fair pay for workers. I saw the gap in the market clear as day. I had $200 left in my account. I used it to register the name Fresh Start Cleaning and build a simple website on a free platform. Maria spread the word to a client she trusted, a woman who'd complained about her current service. I met her, offered a lower rate for better work, and she hired us. Our first client. Starting the business brought back memories of business school. I'd sit in the front row, notebook full of ideas. My professor once pulled me aside after class. "Lauren," he said, "you've got a natural instinct for this. Don't let anyone dim that." I'd forgotten that version of myself, the one who believed she could build something big. Now, in a tiny studio apartment I'd just rented, I felt her waking up, but I wrestled with myself. Using what I overheard, people's private conversations, felt like a betrayal, even if they'd treated me like I wasn't there. Was I stooping to their level? I paced my apartment, the single bulb flickering above. Then I realized something. They'd used their power to crush me, to make me invisible. I wasn't hurting anyone by listening. I was turning their dismissal into my strength. My business would be different, ethical, fair, built on respect for the women I hired. By candlelight in that cramped apartment, I wrote my business plan. My pen scratched the paper, mapping out services, pricing, hiring. I hired Maria first, then 2 more women who needed a fresh start like me. We worked hard, cleaned better than anyone, and kept our clients' trust. Word spread. Soon we had 5 clients, then 10. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was building something real. Sometimes our greatest strengths come alive when we've been underestimated. Has someone's dismissal ever pushed you to prove them wrong? Maybe it was a rejection, a snub, or a moment that lit a fire in you. Share your story in the comments. I read every one, and our community wants to hear how you turned rejection into fuel. If this story's hitting home, smash that like button. Part 4 is coming, and you won't believe where this goes next. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss it. Fresh Start Cleaning wasn't just a job. It was my fight to take back my life. I had a plan. I targeted wealthy neighborhoods, places like the Preston's World, where people valued privacy and quality. I printed flyers with my own money, slipping them into mailboxes after dark. I called potential clients offering free trials to prove we were better. My first big client was Mrs. Larson, a kind woman with a mansion full of art. She loved our work, how we left her home spotless without a trace of gossip. She told her friends, and soon her entire social circle was calling me. I hired women like me, smart, overlooked, needing a second chance. There was Tanya, a single mom who'd lost her job during a layoff, and Rosa, who'd escaped a bad marriage. I paid them fairly, gave them benefits, and listened to their ideas. Our company wasn't like the Preston's World, where people were used and discarded. We built trust, not just with clients, but with each other. The business grew fast. Within a year, we had 20 clients, then 50. I rented a small office, bought more supplies, hired more staff. I'd drive our van between jobs, the radio playing softly, feeling proud for the first time in years. We weren't just cleaning houses, we were building lives. Working in wealthy homes taught me something. People talk freely when they think you're invisible. I heard everything: stock tips, real estate deals, family secrets. I never shared their personal drama, but business information? That was different. One day, while polishing a client's dining table, I overheard a developer on the phone. He mentioned a new shopping center coming to a quiet part of town, months before it hit the news. I acted fast. I pooled my savings, bought a small plot of land in that area, and sold it later when prices doubled. That money funded more vans, more hires. I stayed careful. I never crossed lines. No blackmail, no leaks. Unlike the Prestons, who'd built their wealth by pushing others down, I wanted my business to lift people up. I started talking to other service workers, drivers, gardeners, nannies. We shared what we heard, not to hurt anyone, but to help each other. A gardener tipped me off about a new client. A driver warned me about a shady supplier. We became a quiet network, watching out for one another. One afternoon I was cleaning for a family friend of the Prestons. She was on the phone, her voice casual as she gossiped. "The Prestons are in trouble," she said. "Charles's big investment deal fell apart. Some kind of fraud." My mop stopped moving. I listened as she described how Charles had sunk millions into a shady scheme, thinking it'd make him richer. It collapsed, dragging their family name with it. They were selling their vacation homes, their cars, even parts of their real estate empire to cover the losses. Their reputation was ruined. I stood there, the mop handle cold in my hands. Part of me felt satisfied. They'd tried to break me and now they were falling, but another part felt something unexpected: empathy. I remembered Charles's laugh, Eleanor's sharp smile, Claire's quick glances. They were flawed, cruel even, but they were human. I didn't want to be like them, gloating over someone's pain. I pushed the feeling down and kept working. A few weeks later, an email landed in my inbox. The sender's name stopped me cold: Eleanor Preston. My former mother-in-law was applying for a phone scheduling job at Fresh Start. My heart raced. I read the application, her words polite but stiff, asking for a chance to contribute. She didn't know I owned the company. None of them did. I sat at my desk staring at her name. My first instinct was to delete it. After everything, her calling me the help, her cold stares, why should I give her a chance? I could reject her and feel the sting of revenge. But then I paused. That's what they would do. I wanted to be different. I decided to hire her, but not directly under me. I set up a system where she'd report to my operations manager, keeping my name out of it. I wanted to see if she'd changed. Eleanor wasn't the only one. Claire applied next, for a cleaning position. Then Charles, asking to maintain equipment. I interviewed them through my manager, staying anonymous. They were different now. Eleanor spoke softly, no trace of her old sharpness. Claire, who once laughed at my accent, kept her eyes down, answering questions humbly. Charles, the man who'd handed me his glass without a glance, talked about his skills with tools eager to work. I hired them all. They didn't know I was their boss. I'd check in quietly, watching from a distance. Eleanor answered phones with a steady voice, scheduling clients without complaint. Claire scrubbed floors, her hands red from work. Charles fixed vacuums and mops, methodical and focused. They were good at their jobs, better than I expected. I saw them improving, taking pride in small tasks. It confused me. These were the people who'd made me feel worthless. Now they were human. One day, months later, I stood in the doorway of our supply room. Charles was there, hunched over a broken vacuum cleaner, tools spread out on the floor. He didn't see me. He was talking to Rosa, one of my best cleaners. I made mistakes, he said, his voice low. I raised my son to value the wrong things, money, status. I see it now. Rosa nodded, listening. It's never too late to change, she said. I leaned against the doorframe, my chest tight. Charles's hands moved carefully, tightening a screw. The man who treated me like a servant was admitting he'd been wrong. I wanted to feel triumph, but instead I felt something heavier. His words echoed my own regrets, how I'd tried to change myself for them, how I'd lost pieces of who I was. I slipped away before he saw me, my thoughts tangled. Success can feel like the best revenge, but sometimes it brings feelings you didn't expect. Have you ever achieved something that felt amazing but left you with complicated emotions? Maybe it was a win that made you question what you really wanted. Share your story in the comments. I read every one, and our community wants to hear how you navigated those mixed feelings. If you felt this kind of complicated victory, hit that subscribe button. Part 5 is coming, and you won't want to miss the final twist. Tap the bell so you're ready. I'm back at my desk, the same one from the start. The folders are ready, each one labeled with a Preston's name. The office smells of lemon polish, a scent that steadies me. I check my watch. 2 minutes until they arrive. My heart beats steady now, not racing like before. I think back to my old jobs, sitting across from bosses who'd nitpick every mistake. Their words stung, but they taught me something. Fairness matters. Today, I'm the boss. I could use this moment to hurt the Prestons, to make them feel small like they did to me. But that's not who I am. I pull out their performance metrics. The numbers don't lie. Eleanor, Claire, Charles, they're good employees, reliable, hardworking, better than I expected. I set my jaw. This review will be professional no matter what they say or do. Eleanor walks in first. Her gray hair is neatly pinned, her face tired but composed. She sits, clutching a notepad, and doesn't look at me right away. Then her eyes meet mine. Her pen freezes mid-air, her lips part, and I see the recognition hit. Her former daughter-in-law, the woman she called the help, is her boss. Her cheeks flush and she grips the chair's armrest. Claire and Charles enter next. Claire's eyes widen, her cleaning apron still tied loosely. Charles freezes in the doorway, his toolbox clunking against the frame. The room is silent, heavy with their shock. I sit straight, my hands folded on the desk. I don't smile or frown. I let them process it. For the first time, I feel powerful, not because I'm hurting them, but because I'm in control. Eleanor speaks first, her voice sharp. "This is absurd. You planned this?" Claire shifts in her seat, muttering, "You're humiliating us." Charles stays quiet, staring at the floor. I keep my voice even. "We're here to discuss your performance. That's all." Eleanor stands, grabbing her bag. "I'm not doing this." I look at her calmly. "You're free to leave, Eleanor, but there aren't many jobs in town for you right now." She freezes, her hand on the doorknob. She sits back down, her face tight. Then Charles surprises me. He leans forward, his voice low. "We deserve this," he says. "We treated you poorly, Lauren. I see that now." His words catch me off guard. Claire's eyes fill with tears. "I'm sorry," she says, her voice breaking. "I was awful to you. I didn't know how to stop." Her apology feels real, raw. I nod, keeping my face steady, but inside I'm reeling. I had a speech ready, one about how they underestimated me, how I rose above their cruelty, but standing here seeing their faces, I don't say it. Revenge feels empty now. Instead, I open their folders. Let's talk about your work, I say. I point out their strengths: Eleanor's organized scheduling, Claire's attention to detail, Charles's skill with repairs. I also note where they can improve like any boss would. Then I share something they don't expect. Fresh Start is expanding, I say. We're opening a second location next year. I'm looking for team leaders. If you keep improving, you could move up. Their jaws drop. Eleanor blinks rapidly. Claire wipes her eyes. Charles looks at me like he's seeing me for the first time. I'm offering them a real chance, not because they deserve it, but because I believe in second chances. It's what my company stands for. A knock at the door interrupts us. I frown. It's not on the schedule. I open it, and there he is, Daniel, my ex-husband. His suit is wrinkled, his hair thinner than I remember. He looks smaller, not the confident man I fell for. Lauren, he says, his voice shaky, I heard you're hiring. I need a job. The room goes still. The Prestons stare at him, then at me. My mind races. Daniel, the man who laughed when his mother called me the help, is asking for my help. Part of me wants to say no, to shut the door on him like he shut me out. But another part remembers the good moments. Dancing in our apartment, his smile in that coffee shop. I think about forgiveness, but also wisdom. Hiring him would blur lines I've worked hard to draw. I take a breath. I'm sorry, Daniel, I say. We don't have openings for you. His face falls, but he nods. I understand, he says, and leaves. I close the door, my hands steady. I've grown beyond revenge, but also beyond risking my peace. A few weeks later, I host a business dinner at my home. The table is set with simple plates, not china, but it's mine. My team is there. Maria, Tanya, Rosa, laughing, sharing stories. Eleanor, Claire, and Charles are there too, not as in-laws, but as employees. They talk respectfully, asking about our expansion plans. I watch them, remembering that Thanksgiving dinner years ago when I stood holding a dirty glass, invisible. Now I'm the one leading the conversation. I used to think revenge would feel good, making the Prestons pay for how they hurt me. But sitting here, surrounded by people I've lifted up, I feel something better. Fulfillment. Success isn't about proving them wrong, it's about becoming who I was meant to be. The Prestons saw me as powerless, someone to fetch drinks. I saw power they couldn't. Quiet, steady, built on hard work and heart. That bourbon glass Charles handed me wasn't a burden. It was an opportunity. They saw a servant. I saw a future they couldn't imagine. I carried that glass out their door, and it led me here. To a company that changes lives. To a life that's mine. I stand in my office looking out the window. The city lights glow below, steady and bright. In my mind, I see myself walking out of that mansion. The glass cold in my hand. My steps firm against the gravel. That moment wasn't the end. It was the beginning. True success isn't just about proving others wrong. It's about becoming the person you were meant to be, no matter what stood in your way. Has someone's underestimation ever shaped your path to who you are today? Share your story in the comments. I read everyone, and our community wants to hear how you rose above. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button for more tales of resilience and transformation. Thank you for joining me on this journey.